I have felt confused by my emotions, labeling them, identifying them, sitting with them, feeling them. Whew, so much. Today I have a Reddit story that talks about emotional regulation and all of the complexities that are involved with that. Hi there, my name is Raquel Perez, and I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado. I work with individuals when it comes to sex therapy, relationship therapy, therapy for depression and anxiety, and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. This is where I share stories, mine and others' stories, and I also share how my body and mind are making sense of the information. With that, let's go ahead and get started with today's story. This is how the story goes. I've been trying to work through some emotional regulating issues via several online sources. I've been primarily going through Therapy in a Nutshell on YouTube and the How We Feel app, as well as others. And I've reached an impasse. For starters, I'm not sure what to do with the emotions once I ID them. For instance, if I determine my emotion is disappointed, what then? I've guessed what I'm feeling, but where does that leave me other than just being able to say, hey, it looks like I'm disappointed. After guessing what my emotion is, I'm still disappointed. That does not help me become any less disappointed. If anything, I'm more disappointed because I'm fully aware of it. Does that make sense? Likewise, if I look on the color wheel provided by Therapy in a Nutshell and start with my default emotion of irate, I'm encouraged to move outward on the wheel, finding more descriptive emotions. There is no irate on her wheel, so I start with the closest word, anger. That then leads me from anger to furious to mad. Each step diminishes the intensity of what I'm actually feeling. So I end up with an emotion that is often nowhere near what I'm feeling. I'm also encouraged to explore whether the emotion I'm feeling is the real emotion. Therapy in a Nutshell calls it primary and secondary emotions. Certainly, if I rage at the traffic lights that weren't synchronized on my way into work this morning, there is something else going on. But is there a situation where anger and irate are the true emotions? Unless I'm totally missing something, it seems as if I'm convincing myself that what I'm feeling is not what I'm actually feeling and is actually a less intense emotion. Thanks for your help. Now let's go back to the beginning of this story. The author states that they are working through regulating their emotions. I am a big believer in opening up our curiosities to gain insight and self-awareness into what's happening in the inside. And one of the very first curiosities that comes up for me is, why did this individual come to the place that they felt as though they needed to start regulating some of their emotions? In other words, where did that come from? How did they find the understanding that this is the time in which they needed to begin to regulate some of their emotions? Now, this person is the only person that would be able to really answer that question. From reading through the story, maybe it's that this person is feeling disappointed in themselves, maybe in others, and they don't want to feel that way. Or maybe this person gets angry or irate, often or easily. Maybe that's affecting their life or their relationships. Now, yes, these are only some guesses based off of the story, but hopefully there is an understanding of what I mean by expanding on why this person has come to this place of wanting to regulate their emotions. In my opinion, if we open up this curiosity and we begin to answer these questions, it can shed so much light on the direction in which we want to proceed. In other words, bringing up more questions like, do you want this to look different? And if you do, how do you want it to look different? Another question might be, if it did look the way that I wanted it to look, what would that be? What would this situation look like if it looked the way I wanted it to look? And in this sense, it starts to kind of pave a path in which direction we want to work in. So again, I would encourage this person to open up their curiosities about why it is that they have chosen this to be the time to find some emotional regulation. The next portion of the story that really stands out for me is the portion where the author describes that they aren't really able to feel less disappointed once they have identified what it is that they are feeling. And so if we lend again this lens of curiosity, how does that begin to change the conversation? Because it's at least my perspective or my experience, that when I try to change or force myself to feel differently than what I actually feel, it doesn't go very well. So how would it look different if I begin to be more curious about the feeling that it is that I am having? If we take this story, for example, the disappointment. How is the disappointment sitting in my body? What are the reactions that my body is having to being disappointed? What is it that's happening for me because of this disappointment? Now, if we look at this story as an example, maybe it's that the disappointment is making this person feel incredibly overwhelmed, incredibly stressed, maybe a lot of pressure. Maybe it makes them scared. Any of these things would make sense. But maybe we can start to see how being curious about the disappointment can begin to shift that perspective from us wanting to force ourselves to either feel less of what we're feeling or feel something entirely different. And it's my opinion that this is what it is to really sit with an emotion. And we can gain so much insight and so much self-awareness of what it is that is happening inside of us, again, rather than trying to force it to be different. Now, the last piece of the story that is sticking with me is the portion where the author talks about the emotion wheel that they have been introduced to, and also primary and secondary emotions. Now, first thinking about this emotion wheel that they've been introduced to, for them, it isn't really landing with them. And to me, that makes complete and total sense, because it's my opinion, at least, that it would be impossible to take all of the possible emotions and feelings that a person could have and display them on just one wheel. Now, if you have found a tool like this that has been useful for you, then that's great. However, for this person, the emotion wheel that they've been introduced to has presented some challenges in working with it. And to me, that makes complete and total sense. Because again, all of the dynamic and different emotions that a person can feel, in my opinion, would be impossible to capture on one wheel. Now, if we start to think about primary and secondary emotions, I also believe that there is space to talk about primary and secondary emotions, because I do feel like there are some emotions that come online that are truly too difficult, maybe even one would say impossible to sit with, and our body kind of hijacks, if you will, that emotion and replaces it with a different emotion. However, the process by which the body does this is very different for all of us. And so it would be impossible or very difficult to display, again on a wheel, how all of these nuances and differences are applied in every single individual person. However, if we apply a curious lens to what it is that's happening in our body, it can lend itself to identifying the emotion that it is that we're feeling, labeling the emotion that it is that we're feeling, And it would probably also end up helping us identify if it is a primary emotion or a secondary emotion. So as you can see, I believe that lending that curious lens can lead to so much discovery of what it is that is happening inside. Now, I know that this is challenging, and I know it's difficult to sit with these emotions that are hard. I understand all of that. However, I do think that it can lend itself to so much insight and self-awareness. Well, my friend, that's all I have for today's video. If you have found it useful or helpful in any way, please hit that like button down below. If you would like to get more content like it on a weekly basis, please subscribe to the channel. If something has come up in you and you want to get in on the conversation, please do by dropping a comment down below. If you have found this useful, you might also find this meditation for strong emotions useful also. Meditations are something that you will find often on the channel as well. Now, until next time, see you then.